Welcome to Google Analytics, settings and setup, right? So this is how we are going to get going with your Google Analytics account, right? And be able to actually track and see how your customers are moving through your website, right? So there's a kind of a expectations or a dichotomy that I should set up before we really dive into this, right? So you need to understand that the metrics you're going to see within Google Analytics and Google AdWords may not always precisely align, right? And it's because of the simple fact is that Google Analytics is designed to track all behavior and actions on your website and then kind of follow people around after the fact and where they go and looking at that. Where the Google Ads account is designed to track activity on that's based off of your videos, your clicks on your ads, and your actual ads, right? So your most accurate data for your Google Ads performance is going to be within Google Ads, right? But the Google Analytics is a great program for you to understand how people move through your site, right? How long they spend on certain pages, what pages that they enter on, that they have a really good experience, and just understanding the overall usage from once they click on your ads and land on your web page, the usage of that website and their interactions and experience online, right? So the first thing that we need to do is actually go up here to the tools menu and go into linked accounts, right? And that's where we find ourselves here, is right on page. And next thing you want to do is you kind of want to scroll down, or it should be on the top actually. You do Google Analytics, right? Details. This is linking your Google Analytics account to your Google AdWords account, right? So I'm going to go ahead and unlink this just so I can go to the process. All right. I'm doing this now. What you want to do is from this page, you just go ahead and hit link. All right, link this property, select which views to link accounts, go link, import site metrics. You're going to hit save. Okay, now I've got the UA code in there. And then that's going to link to my Google Analytics account, which I can pull up here, right? analytics.google.com, show up. So how you're going to access this once you have got the live system in, right? Oh, it disappears. You can access it through here, right? You can do the measurements, go to Google Analytics. It'll actually populate out, expand it, where you log in. Close that one. So now it may land you on a dashboard from here, right? You can create account here, have you name your account, put in your website URL, categorize what it falls under, and what your business is. You set your time zone in here, select all of these, and then you'll get your tracking ID, right? So let's just go. Growth. V2. Let's put V2 in there. You can always delete this later, right? Growth.com. Set my time zone, and you get your tracking ID, all right? So you have to go ahead and hit accept. It's the marketing platform. Okay, got it. Accept all cookies. Scroll down through this, accept this, measurement controls. Okay, so from this point, give a couple different options. If you are using the plugin within WordPress, then you just have to put in the UA code, which is right here, the UA-124, right? That's how it's going to be identified, right? Even when you look down in the code, that is referenced within the G tag of the code, right? And if you put this code on the site, it goes on every single page, right, into the header of every page you want to track. So you also want to make sure that it's on every single page, right? So it's on the thank you page, it's on any confirmation pages, it's on any of the sub pages, because what's going to happen is if you have it only on the home page and a couple pages, let's say you have it on the home page, your product page, not on the confirmation page or of the order of putting in the say put it in the cart, and then you have it on the cart page, and then you have it on the confirmation page, right? It's going to go boom, 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 home page, product page, and then it's going to fall off because it's not on the confirmation page before the cart, right? So that's those little sub pages that pop up. If they take over the entire screen and they open up outside of the normal dashboard, which most only HTML sites are going to have it done that way, that's where you want to use it. Most of us that you're utilizing either some sort of website building platform, either WordPress, Drupal or something to that effect, you're going to have a plugin that you can utilize this that'll pretty much blast it across the entire site for you. So don't let me scare you by having that, but you want to just make sure that you have it on every single page, because this needs to follow through in order for it to maintain that track record, and it picks up that code at each layer in order for it to be able to detail back to the lists and identify particular actions, right? Like they put it in a cart. If they put it in the cart but they didn't check out, that needs to go into your abandoned cart list. And if there's any process where that code falls off the page or falls out of that process, then it's a broken chain and you can't track the data through, right? So what you're going to do is put that in the head of everything, and it's a pretty easy thing, right? You just basically throw that in there, and that's how you're going to put the overall site tag on the site. Now, the other thing that is very, very valuable that I would say go ahead and create is Google Tag Manager. So just Google that. This is a tremendous tool for utilizing Google Analytics and making sure you can actually send codes out and make dynamic changes in a really fast manner. What you do is just go to that, make sure you're signed in with your Google account that you want to have it all under. I will say Collateral Growth. Sure. Container name, collateralgrowth.com. Now, the container is basically what houses on the site, right? This is going to be where all of your codes are housed. And like the target platform is a web platform. All right, we're doing it on site. So we hit create. Go ahead and hit service there as well. So now you can utilize the tag manager to put your code on site, right? This code right here, if you put in the header on each page, right, and you put this in the body, then you can utilize the tag manager in order to push your codes out there in a much more simple, faster way and keep track of them, right? You set a lot of different variables. And in the bonus section, I've even included a complete guide on how to utilize this to make sure you can utilize it efficiently, and it makes sure that you're really saving time in dealing with all the code setup and manufacturing, right? Or kind of updates. So one of the other things, so now that we have our property created, right, we have Collateral Growth. We're going to go back here. All right, so I'm just going to go Collateral Growth Inc. because that's what I've got in here, right? So the next step in what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to set up goals, okay? So this is how you actually track within Google Analytics. You go over here, you set goals. You hit New Goal. You have a template, or you can do custom. Select a template to start with pre-filled configurations. So just go ahead and do Continue. All right, Collateral. Now we'll go into some more advanced stuff whenever we start talking about the Google Tag Manager and as we get down through these. But these are just going to be the very, very simple ones, right? So Collateral Growth, course sale. Right. And so basically what it is, do destination, hit Continue. Begins with equals to regular expression. Comes up on my screen for an app, thank you.html, right? This is going to be on the thank you page after the course. You just put in thank you. It'll be fine. You put a monetary value on there, like $500, right? Funnel. So these funnels are more according to steps, right? So if you want to set up the goal where it's like, okay, first of all, they have to go to homepage, right? Say, and it's home, right? It contains, require it, and then it goes to course page. course. And thank you. Like if I want to track the interaction of how that it's only going to actually show up, on the thank you page is where the destination is, but it has to follow these exact parameters for doing this, right? So they have to land on the home page first, then they have to go to the course page where the URL contains that, and they have to go to the thank you page where the URL would contain something like that, right? You can't just leave the space in there. It has to be how it's going to show up after the fact, right? After the URL. See how this says thank you? All right. It has to be like that. You can put a dash in there. You can put an underscore mark, whatever the URL subcontext is going to be. Right? Like, so when we go to collateralgrowth.com, right? Let's say they have to go to the home page first. So it's going to be this. And simplify it so it doesn't have a lot of different things, right? And then we're going to go to education. Page has to contain this. And then, they have to go to the contact page. We'll just say that's the thank you page, right? So you can set predefined goals that are like sales actions, but you can also set these goals at any orientation. Say you want to figure out how many people, go to the education page, but then go to the contact page and contact us directly, right? It's like home, basically you're going to put in there where it would be this, right? So anytime that particular action happens, right, then we equate a $500 value to it, or maybe that's only a $50 value. It's more of a lead, right? And, the ultimate goal of this particular one would be on the contact page. But in order for this to follow through and equal this, it has to follow this exact funnel because I have this selected, right? If I just want to track that page and people getting to that page, then I can turn the funnel option on or off. Okay, so that's what the difference is in setting this up, right? And then you can do this and you can actually verify the goal, right? Goal will have 0 conversion rate based on your past 7 days. And if we want to do this, do verify goal, re-verify goal, and still have 7%, right? So that's one of those things where you can check your values right here before you're actually installing them, and you just hit save. And it'll upload your goals here, okay? So now you can also, if you want to do another goal in here, or if we want to do custom, continue, all right, and so we want to figure out how many contact forms, right? You do very defined, categories equals to the action, what the label is, and the value. If they want to, it's a goal ID, goal set 1. So the goal sets is going to go down through there, right? So if I want to do duration, greater than 5 minutes, value option, if they stay on the page 5 minutes longer, I know I'm going to make $5. You can hit save. And you've got a couple different goals in here, right? So these are how the setting up the goals are how you can really kind of granularly look at certain actions on the site where it'll track back to the system. And now we're going to go through this a little bit more in depth in the next lesson where we go over the dashboard and how you can actually look at some of these metrics once you've set the goals up in here. But primarily, these are the actions that you need to complete before you really start looking at any data within the system, because these are going to really help you start to segment that data down and really identify it in the most valuable manners, right? Where you can actually see, particular points of fall off, particular valuable points of really efficient sales cycles where, if they hit the home page, they go to the consultation page, then they go to education page, that's your really money wise, right? So you can kind of force that through, better call to actions on the landing page, or tabs or directional buttons that'll lead them down that path, rather than them just having to go to the home page and try and figure out how to get to those other pages, right? You can utilize this data and these goal sets in order to make micro changes on your website to help improve that experience in the process and the efficiency of the flow once they hit the website. And that's primarily what these things are used for. Now, the other thing that you're going to really dive into is kind of the attributions of the code, right? So when we go back into the actual code setting up of things, right, that's where we're going to dive into more like Google Tag Manager. And these are for things that you can actually use Google Tag Manager to fire the code after a web page is landed. Once they get a certain point to the web page, you can fire those. And that's going to be more about, really just, you have to custom program the codes. And that's what we're going to look at right now. As you do that, right, you're going to, again, go back to the tracking information, right? We've got our tracking code here, but there's some stuff that we want to go ahead and continue to set up, right? Like the data collection, we definitely want to do remarketing in that. So you're going to hit save. So data retention, again, they give you the ability to do 50 months, 48 months, something like that. I just retain it as long as possible, because you pay for it. You want to be able to utilize it for as long as possible. Right. So the user ID stuff is not, it's more for tracking like user information, right? If you have logged in users or membership portals, it's not going to be so much for e-com sites or for lead gen, unless you're talking about, really having to, if you're doing lead gen and you're doing more stuff that has to deal with TCPA, then this is definitely a section that you would want to, look at and program in, because you need to be able to have that information as far as what the users were logged in. Okay. The session settings, these are going to like tell you how long basically they time out, right? So if they enter a session, they don't exit or close it out, and that's what those are going to be in. Now, we've got that all kind of managed out. Now, the other thing is, if you want to add additional users to your account, right, this is how you do it. It's under user manage, and this is all in the admin portion at the bottom there. And to invite additional users, this is all you have to do is basically add users. You can even add groups of users. You just send in their email, and this is where you're going to select their permission levels, right? So if we want to go Nelson at Collateral Visions, my emails, right? You can do edit down through there. It gives me all that, or I can select as manage users. That gives me ultimate control over it. Then I just hit add, right? It sends out an invitation to my email, which I have to log in, create a password and username, or password based off of that. Now your Google Ads linking. Again, we see we've already been linked in here. Now you can either link it through this area, or you can do it through the Google Ads side, right? Either one is going to work out for you. And then the other thing that we get into over here is these filters, right? So the filters are very, very valuable for just basically segmenting out your data, quite frankly, right? So you can do all this basically where you can exclude certain sources, IP address, ISPs, right? Like I want a home address. And I'll input, please exclude, right, from my IP address equal to that. And I'll put my IP address in there. You have a couple different options as well: subdirectories, host names, ISPs, domains. If you know a particular domain is, cracking you up, or again, if you're an agency and you just don't want your clients going to your particular, or you don't want your workers going to your website, or operating on Facebook, or there's a lot of different ways that you can use IP exclusions to make sure that the content isn't in actually put into your charts, right? So the other thing is the e-commerce setting that you want to do. You always want to have enable e-commerce, right? And then you put your checkout label. So thank you. That done, and save. And you can do some attribution models as well. This is what your attribution is going to be throughout the entire account. So default attribution. Now we're going to go more into the attribution models later on in this particular section, but just kind of a quick rundown. You've got your linear, which is a flat structure, right? It gives as much credit to the first input as the middle and the last. The first interaction gives just the first click. Last interaction is last click, right? Or within, if they've basically, let's say it's really last interaction, right? So let's say they click on a Google ad and they go to your website and then they bounce back off and then they just find you via organic or they type in direct. Then that direct interaction, even though it wasn't a click, but they typed in your URL to get direct to your site, that's going to give it the most credit. So it'll just fall into the direct category under last interactions, right? And we'll go into more of that in the next lesson as far as going into the dashboard navigation. The time decay is it basically gives less and less credit to the first touch point as time goes on. And the position base gives most of the credit to the first and most of the credit to the last, with only a minor in between that you can adjust within the system, right? First interaction 40, middle interaction is 20, last interaction 40, right? For 100% interaction rate. Now you can do the look back windows on all these as well. And look back window is going to be more for like how long you should look at them. Like what is your overall time period that you're considering a customer still in your sales funnel, right? Is typically what you can look at this for, right? If I have a 90-day cycle, then, my 90 days prior to conversion. If it's a much shorter one, if I'm looking at like 7 days, then I'm only going to look back for customers that have interacted through either watching ads, videos, views, something to that effect over the last 7 days. And you can adjust credit based on user engagement. So again, this is time on site versus page depth. And, depending on what it is, like if it's a one pager and just a very long form content, then page depth will work. Usually time on site is the best determiner of a user engagement on the site. And then you have apply custom credits, right? This is where you get a little bit more defined with the custom credits, right? You have to actually do a little bit more in the strategic aspect of it. So include position paths, exactly matching any or, add this statement, and you can basically do an or. Let's say campaign contains collateral growth. So, this is basically this is really, really kind of very high level where you're actually assigning specific attribution models to certain campaign types. Not something I really recommend. Again, depending on how diverse I would rather say the only thing that most of the time when these, are utilized is for very, very large scale lead gen programs or e-commerce sites. Okay. So that's going to be your default attribution. Whatever you select in here is going to be what the model that's going to be present where, viable within the account. Okay. Set your half-life of decay, 7 days, assisted click. All right. Prior to 7 days, half credit. I'm always going to do a time decay because, I just think that the further away from the initial interaction point, the less valuable it is. So that's what I'm going to set mine in here as kind of a default. For a lot of my lead gen companies, it's the last click because they're, when you're talking about health insurance or auto warranties or something to that effect, there's not a whole lot of additional experiences that come in after the fact. So those are our kind of the baseline settings that you need to set up within your Google Analytics account before we really start diving into the dashboard and looking at what the metrics is. You have to have all these foundational metrics and settings applied. Otherwise, it can really kind of throw you off within your overall, campaign. So that's one of the things that you really need to make sure that you're focusing on. Now, if you really want to kind of get really in depth with it and go out and beyond, I don't know if there's one thing that every single click that ever happens on Google, right? It's associated back with a click ID. But one thing that I've introduced to you a couple times is the analytics tool for adding UTM parameters, right? Now, if you want to get hyper granular and make sure that your UTM parameters are overriding any Google click ID values, then that's what this advanced settings under property settings, right? And you can set this per website, and it's basically down here under advanced settings, right? Allow your UTM codes to override your Google click IDs. Depending on what it is, right? The only time I would definitely, look at this is if I'm looking at, more larger scale lead gen properties, those things, but that's not something you really need to do. But you definitely want to go down here and enable demographic and interest reports, use enhanced click attribution, And we're going to go ahead and save as well there. Wait for it to load back up. And then as we go to the all website settings, you're going to also go ahead and include the site search. Remember, you can put in your site, your strip queries out of your URL, those kind of things. If you have a search basis, that's something to use within there. You can also assign categories to it. Those are more for e-com sites that have large databases and things along those lines. It's not something that everybody's going to use, but if you definitely have a larger site structure, or you do a lot of blogging where people are constantly searching up content, things like that, that'll be a valuable setting for you. But other than that, I mean, those are the main settings to really get your analytics account set up with the proper foundation to start registering your e-com track, your sales, your conversions, and just understanding the overall flow of your customers on your site. And again, go back and review this as far as how to set up goals too, because as you get the metrics and you get the data in from your Google sites, from your organic presence, from your social presence, and you start kind of seeing how they're all flowing together, you'll start realizing that you need to kind of set some goals to even identify certain behaviors and certain conversion paths and learn how to exploit them and utilize tools within your website to further prompt those kind of things. So definitely dive into analytics, on a daily basis to see how your website's functioning. You should be looking at your bounce rate. You should be looking at your time on page visits, a lot of the different metrics that you're going to understand with the overall flow and site. I'm even going to teach you before we get out of this module on how to do some testing with some really cool tools with sites, just to understand potential improvements on your site, so that not only can you make sure that your Google Ads campaigns are running at the optimal level, you can utilize the Google Analytics to make sure that your site is also high converting, increasing your ROI, so it's lowering the cost with very relevant data, and it's also constantly putting money back in your pocket. So let's dive further into analytics and really get down to the meat and potatoes of this tracking and figure out exactly how your clients are interacting with your site.